Welcome, everyone, to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. Once a week on Thursdays at noon Eastern Time, I come on Zoom for about 30 minutes for an informal show and tell with manuscripts from our collection. So if you are new, you're very welcome. I'm very glad to have you here. If you have questions or things to say during the talk, please put them in the chat. I will keep my eye on the chat. My colleague Amy Hutchins is here, and she will also be watching the chat. And Nick is here, and he can also answer questions in the chat if he feels like it. And if you're not new, if you've been here before, I see you in the list of participants, and it's great to see you here. So let's get started. So this is a really interesting book that we're going to be looking at. It is a 15th century genealogy text. It was written in France, sort of in the middle part of the 15th century. It's dated to sometime between 1440 and 1460. And it's written in Middle French. It is a codex, obviously. It is a very tall codex. In fact, it's so tall we can't really see the whole thing on the camera. So I'm going to show you how tall this is. And there's a reason I think that it's shaped like this. This is an unusual kind of shape for a codex. It is in a wooden binding with leather over the top, and you can see there's sort of stamped leather. And at one point, there were some kind of clasps here. We can see that there's still hardware here where the straps, the clasps were held and the straps sort of came through. So, but those are not there any longer. Let me see what the record says about the binding. So the binding is contemporary. So the binding is also a 15th century binding. So it's a genealogy, which means it has diagrams, genealogical diagrams, and we'll look at them in a minute. But the fact that it's a codex is kind of interesting because in the Middle Ages, and look into like past the Middle Ages into the Renaissance, these kinds of texts were pretty common, and they were almost always presented as rolls. Because if you think about a genealogy, what you're doing is you're starting maybe with Adam and Eve, right, at the very beginning, and then you're going through time, and time doesn't stop. It just keeps going. And so a roll is a really great way to display that because what you have is essentially a format that doesn't stop. And so now, before we even look at this, I'm going to move this out of the way, and I'm going to show you an example just so you can see that. So this is MS Roll 1588, which I put in the chat, so you've seen that link. So this is just a portion of, or a fragment of a chronology. It's a genealogical chronicle fragment, and this is some early kings of England. I don't even want to say too much about the content because what's important is that we have, the start of the diagram here, and then we see lines coming off of here. So we'll say here's the king, and he has 3 sons, and then the sons have sons, and the sons have sons, and so you start coming down here, and then there's text alongside the diagram that's sort of explaining who these people are and maybe important historical things that happen. And this is really nice because we can sort of keep going and going and going. And even when things get a little complicated, if you have someone who has a whole lot of children or you have a lot of splitting off, it is relatively easy to follow in this format, right? All right, so I'm going to put this away for now, and I'm going to pull this book back. Because if you're thinking, how does that work if you have like pages? That's what I want you to be wondering. So we're not actually going to see immediately chronology. It actually opens up with this beautiful preface page. And now I'm turning to Lisa's paper right here. Actually, let me get that out of the, there we because what she's doing in this article, so she did an edition about 10 years ago of this French text, which is it's the universal chronicle, right? So it's like universal history of the world from the very, very beginning up until the 15th century when it was written. And so in this article, she describes some new versions of that text that have been discovered since she did her edition in 2014. So this is one, and this is it's LJS 266, which means it was in the collection of Lawrence J. Schoenberg. So Lisa knew about this manuscript, but it was only in, I think, 2014 itself that this was actually identified as a version of that text. So it's described in her article. And what she says is that in the prologue here, it sort of lays out the extent of the manuscript. So here's where the scribe or whoever is compiling this is saying, okay, here is all the information that's going to be in the manuscript. So we're starting with Adam and Eve to the Great Flood, through Shem, Ham, and Japhet and all of their descendants. And then we're going into the royal families in England and France up until 1400. And the popes up to Pope Innocent the Seventh in 1406. So it's all of the world in this many leaves, right? So not very much space. Spoiler, it's not finished. So he didn't actually, he said he was going to do all this and then he didn't. I do want to take a moment with this because this is really a beautiful page. We have illumination in the initials and also in the decoration along the sides. This is the most beautiful page in the book. Don't get used to it, okay? All right, so then we turn the page and we get our first, there's quite a lot of text in here, but we get our first genealogical sort of diagram. So we start with Adam and Eve here, and we have their children and then their descendants sort of coming down here. And then it kind of ends, right? Because it's a page, it's a codex, and this is what codices do. And then we turn the page, and there's more text, and then we come over here, and there's more of this genealogy. And at this point, we are still in the Bible. So one thing that's important to note about this manuscript in comparison with other manuscripts of this text, and it adds another bit of complexity to what this scribe is trying to do, and that is that in other versions of this text, it actually presents the historical times in parallel columns, so you can see what's happening in different places at the same time, right? So you'll have biblical things happening, and then you have the ancient Rome sort of happening at the same time, and then something else and something else. For someone looking at that, one thing, it's in a roll. So again, like the time just keeps going. And you also have these parallel stories, so you can sort of look back and forth and see, oh, here's what's happening. And what the scribe had to do here, and it's actually explained in the prologue, and Lisa does a nice job of explaining this, is it breaks those parallel stories out. So instead of having the Bible alongside ancient Rome, we're going to have first the Bible, and then we're going to go, back in time and go to ancient Rome, and add that to the fact that this is trying to do genealogy in a format that is not conducive to it, and it's a little bit of a mess. But I think it looks really neat. And now to show you, Claire, I will show you the text up close. I'm just going to do something else really quickly because I want to show you what the parallel looks like. So I'm going to again close this up and then look at one more thing, and then we'll bring it back and we'll take a really good look at that book. I don't know how well this is going to work. This is a brand new purchase for us. This is another manuscript that is described in Lisa's article. This is a fragment from one of these universal chronicles that's a roll. And so, oh, this is actually going to work. I'm shocked. I didn't think this was going to work. Okay, fantastic. So this is just one small fragment of what must have been a very large roll. This is very wide. This is like 2 feet wide at least. And Lisa says it's probably 3% of whatever this was. And she doesn't know of any other fragments of this roll. So this is pretty unique. But you can see what I mean about the parallel structure. So I'm just going to go back to Lisa's article and see what exactly is happening here. So what we have is the beginning of the New Testament here, the assassination of Julius Caesar. So that's what's happening here, that's Julius Caesar being assassinated there. So roughly the same time period or similar time period. And then we have the 15, hold on, I'm going to pull this over here. The 15 final signs, Pontius Pilate, and the calling of Peter and Paul. That's what's happening in the next column. So that doesn't get an illustration, but that's what's here. And then the last one is the early kings of England and the foundation of London. So there's London there. So there's a whole lot happening, and because it's presented in parallel like this, you can sort of make connections maybe between them. And so taking this and moving it into a format where you can't do this and you have to do something else is pretty interesting. So I'm going to take this away, and I would like maybe at some point to do a complete copy with the Codex just on this one. Maybe Nick would like to do that. Volunteering Nick for stuff. Okay. Here we go. So back to this one. So what is happening? I want to find. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So first we have the prologue here, and then the Bible. And Claire wanted me to zoom in so she could see the text a little more. So I will do that. Here we go. The script is, what is the script? It is a bastarda script, is the type of script, which is the bastard. I'm not a paleographer, but I think it's like a Middle French typical script, maybe. So there we go. There are a little illuminated initials also in this part, but nothing quite like the one that we saw before. So what sort of happens generally is when we get to the bottom of a page where these lines are kind of coming out, we start to see kind of instructions for where do you go next to pick it up. So let's see, folder. Well, this isn't quite here yet. I have an example from the article. Let's keep going a little bit. So it doesn't just go to the next page, because here we have more of this text, the textual description, and then here it picks up again, sort of in the middle of this page, coming down. And then we have Solomon, so we've got them coming down, and let's see, 7 and 8. It is, Murray says it looks like a choose your own adventure book. It kind of feels like that, like where are we going to take this? Where are we going to take this next? So we're still in the biblical section, and these lines. And even within the context of the manuscript itself, apparently, there are places where it will say, go to this page next, but that's actually not correct. So you have to figure out where it actually goes to next. So we've got these helpful page number, folio numbers up here on the right. So I think, here we have 11, and then it's through 11 verso is the Bible part. So here we're through the Bible, and then we pick up here. We're actually here with ancient history. So again, in the original, it would have been, in these two actually would have been in parallel and not one after the other. So we're like going back in time again. All right, Amy has very helpfully come into the chat to say, the French term for the script is bâtarde, which meant to refer to the script having formal characteristics of book scripts, combined with more flexible characteristics of document scripts. I knew it was something like that, it was like a combination of things. So it's like a book script, but also more flexible, which is probably nice for a scribe. So now we have ancient history, the descent of Japhet, the foundation of Troy, and the Trojan War, probably over here. So that's what's happening here. And again, we have these descriptions here. So something I learned when I was reading Lisa's article is that so when we talk about manuscripts and manuscripts being copied, we often use sort of familial terms. So there's like the parent manuscript is the one that gets copied, and then there are children, and then there's like children's children and that kind of thing. So there is apparently like the parent manuscript for this universal chronicle is a known manuscript, and it is not illustrated, which this one is also not illustrated. And Lisa, her argument is that this manuscript is actually copied directly from that one, which is also unillustrated. So when we looked at the fragment, the chronicle fragment, the big one, that had sort of circles like this, but they had illustrations in them. And that it was the later copies where those little illustrations got put in. And this one just leaves them empty, or some of them have text written in them as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I like this page because it sort of shows how the diagrams interact with the text, and maybe gives some idea of planning and the order, because the text here is kind of written around the diagram. So the diagram's here, and then we're writing around it, except up here where the scribe has just kind of written over that line. Maybe it's so thin they thought, well, we'll just write over it. And then down here they're writing around it, which kind of makes a nice layout. Look on the layout there. So the Trojan War happens very quickly, and then we move on 13 recto to the foundation of Rome and its early history. So that's what the next few pages are, is Rome and that. And you might, here I'm going to put this up so you can see it. Another thing that I personally like a lot about this manuscript is that it is made of parchment, and it was not, so it's, I think it's really interesting to look at the kinds of parchment that different manuscripts are made of. And this parchment is not great. It's very, I don't know if you can hear it, but it's very crunchy. I like to say it's crunchy. You can really hear it when it moves around. It is, it's nicely prepared, but also you can see a big difference. So parchment is made of animal skin. This is probably made of calf. The flesh side, which is the inside of the skin, is quite creamy colored. It's lighter, and then the hair side, which is the outside, is more yellow and a little darker. And then often in very nice manuscripts, the edges are trimmed off, so you don't see things like this. This is probably an armpit of the animal. It's where it's been pulled during the processing, and they wanted these tall sheets, and so they kept these here, and I like that. There's another one. There's a lot of them as we go through. We'll see them here. I didn't mention why my theory on why the manuscript is shaped like this is because it's sort of emulating the roll, right? The roll, which is tall and long, and so we can't make a codex be exactly like a roll, but one thing that we can do is make it a little more narrow and the pages a little bit longer, and that is sort of reflecting the source of the text, even though it still doesn't quite work very well. So we're still in the history of Rome. Here's more of that. Let's see, and then we get to 16 verso, and there's lots of, I'm guessing these are like Roman, there's Brutus, right? So we've got all of the Roman emperors coming down. And then on 16 verso, interesting. So the next few pages, we're going back and forth a little bit. So 16 verso through 18 verso, so these pages here. Foundation of Sicambria, okay, and early English history through the birth of the mystical 2nd century King Lucius. So that's 18 verso. King Lucius is here. Lucius, probably in here. And then we have more early English history. It looks like the scribe is piecing together different pieces of the story that are not usually put together. So there's a few, they're both English history, but they're sort of being pushed together. So there we go. And then we go back on 20 recto to Julius Caesar and the emperor. Now we've got the emperors of Rome. Okay, Julius Caesar and the emperors of Rome are here. So you can see this sort of, again, this would have been parallel, but here we have to go back and forth between them. And then, Julius Caesar and the emperors of Rome, and that's this whole section here on that through 26 verso. Another thing I like about this manuscript, which is probably neither here nor there, but I like the way that some of these little red, like the red areas here, they end up looking like little hearts. It doesn't mean anything. I just think it's fun that they look like little hearts. I think it's just the way that they're drawn around the text. Ends up looking like that. All right. So, ancient Rome. What comes after ancient Rome? Kings of France through Charles V. So we jump right from Rome to France, which is sort of an interesting choice, and we might argue that it is making an argument about the authority of the kings of France because we're putting them right after Rome, right? Like we're saying maybe there's a continuity here that we want to argue for. This makes me think of Another genealogy that we have looked at in Coffee with the Codex, although it's been a while, our MS Roll 1066, which is a genealogy of Edward IV of England. And that roll does some similar kinds of things in terms of what it includes. That in that one in particular, it's definitely making this argument that Edward IV is the rightful king of England. It starts with Adam and Eve and goes through all of the things that this is going through, and then through all the royal houses and into the history of England. And we've got King Arthur, and it ends with Edward IV and saying, yes, here's your king. And so something kind of similar happening here. So we've got our kings of France, and then after the kings of France, where is that? 30. All right, so here we are. And then we have this diagram at the bottom, but the text was never put in there. And then it's blank. After that, there's several pages. I think it's like a choir, maybe even a couple of choirs, where, and this was prepared. It's been at least ruled. So I'm sorry Brian isn't here to see his ruling. He'd be very excited. But we all can see that ruled just like all of the other pages, but left incomplete. And as often when things are frequently incomplete, and we just don't know. We don't know why. But they still bound it up, and it was on a shelf. So that was good. Oh, Claire is suggesting heart-shaped leaves. Could be heart-shaped leaves. Terry asks, who is the first king of France mentioned? Is Charlemagne not listed? So 27 recto. I don't have a list of them. We can see if we can see that. As far as I know, this manuscript itself hasn't been fully transcribed. Maybe Lisa has done it as part of her work. I'm looking here. I'm just not really sure. I don't know if anyone else can see any of these names. It might be Charlemagne. I see Clovis. That looks like Clovis. My knowledge of French royal houses is not, so I don't know where Clovis fits in, but I'm pretty sure that's Clovis. Joyce, Charlemagne is on page 30. All right, let's see. Let's look for Charlemagne. Is that? I see Charles. I'm seeing some Charleses. Is that who I'm looking at? Joyce? Maybe this is Charlemagne. According to the description, Charlemagne begins the list of Holy Roman emperors, which also makes some sense. Let's see. Holy Roman, Julius Caesar and emperors of Rome. This is where my knowledge, right hand, on 30. I'm on 29. No, he's in the great big circle. There's Charlemagne. He's the big circle. There we go. And then the other, there we go. So here's Charlemagne and then his descendants. And then there we go. And wherever, there we go. And then off to who knows where. All right, I just saw it's actually past 12:30. Thank you all for taking the time to look at this with me. This is really fun. I like this one for a lot of reasons. It's very strange, not entirely successful because it is hard to look through, but yeah, it's pretty neat. So I hope you all have a great week. Hope to see you again next week when we'll have Nick showing us our amazing new book of hours. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you soon.